Hi, everybody. It's 7:30 p.m. here on the East Coast, and as always, we'll go ahead and get our call started on time. We will be recording this call for people to use as a reference and those who have missed it. Welcome to this American Promise Training and Action Series. My name is Marnie Walsh, and I'm the Empowerment Coordinator with American Promise. Whether you've been involved with American Promise for a long time, or if this is your first time, welcome. This is an especially exciting time with the National Citizen Leadership Conference starting this week and our lobby days on May 4th, 5th, and 6th. This call will cover two areas. First, this is our final call to help you prepare for our lobby days meetings with your members of Congress. We have a goal of 100 lobby day meetings with your member of Congress or their staff over those 3 days, and currently we have over 50 lobby day meetings scheduled, but over 120 requested. If you still have not heard from a congressional office you have reached out to, Monday morning is a time to reach out again. Even though we designated May 4th through May 6th as lobby days, the point is to hold the meeting, not to fit into these particular days. Please try to schedule for the near future since the start of our relationship and dialogue with your representative is the most important for our lobby day meetings. This session is also part of our new training and support team series. While there will be several different trainings and support teams that will come out of those trainings, the purpose of this meeting with elected officials training is one, to inspire you about the importance of meeting with elected officials and partnering with them in fulfilling our mission to win the 28th Amendment to get big money out of politics. Two, to help you be a more confident and enthusiastic spokesperson for our work. And three, to provide a structure of ongoing support to assist you in building powerful relationships with your elected officials. After lobby days are over, this meeting with elected officials team will meet monthly to support each other in having breakthroughs in moving your elected officials up the champion scale from opposed, neutral, or supporter, all the way up to advocate, leader, and eventually champion. The volunteer leaders of the meeting with elected official teams are Marie Henselter Kimmel and Vicki Barnes. The first meeting with the elected officials team call is Thursday, May 13th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, Marie and Vicki, for your leadership. The other four trainings and ongoing teams are as follows. One, the friend banking team led by Vicki Barnes. Their next meeting is Thursday, May 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Two, writing letters to the editor team led by Ann Drum. Their next meeting is Thursday, May 27th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. The planning and hosting events team. The planning and hosting events team training, which I will lead, will be Wednesday, May 26th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. The team will be led by Laura Nittmeyer and Ann Drum, which will start in June. Then we have the social media team led by Monica Rodriguez, and their first training will be in June. You'll receive information about joining these teams in the Empowerment Monthly and in an email from me. You can register for these trainings on the American Promise events calendar, which can be found at the bottom of the home page of the website, americanpromise.net. If you have any questions about these upcoming meetings and training calls, please email me at marniew@americanpromise.net. As we said, this is our final lobby day training session, concentrating on getting you ready for our lobby days, May 4th, 5th, and 6th. So far, we've talked about scheduling meetings, preparing for your meetings, role playing for these meetings. Tonight, we're going to have a training similar to our last training, which was Wednesday. We'll do a few role plays and have lots of time to practice and ask questions. The rest of our call tonight will go like this. First, Azer Cole, Deputy Political Director at American Promise, will provide the latest on the NCLC and Lobby Day. Then Marie Henselter Kimmel will tell us about a bit of her mindset before one of those meetings. It can be nerve-wracking, but it does not need to be. Then Aether will talk us through our communication to congressional office that we have already scheduled a meeting with. Then we will have Vicki Barnes tell us how she plans to follow up for her Lobby Day meeting and also celebrate on their successful completion. The major portion of tonight's call will demonstrate the agenda of a Lobby Day meeting by a role play of a section of a meeting with a member of Congress, then send you to breakout rooms to practice what you just observed, and then bring you back for a few questions. We'll do that for two different sections of the meeting, the beginning part of the meeting and the ask. Now I'm going to turn it over to Aether Cole.
Super, thanks, Marnie, and hey, everyone on the call tonight. As everyone has figured, this is a Zoom meeting, and thank you for keeping yourself on mute and throughout the call as folks do share, and we're going to do role plays and hear from folks on any questions. We would love to hear your name and where you're calling in from to get a sense of who's on this call. So all right, I'll jump right into it and say that, as everyone knows, Lobby Days start this upcoming week, and I'm very excited personally. Each year that we've done this, it's a bit like pushing a big rock up a hill. And at a certain point, all of the point people are assigned and all of the meeting requests get sent in, and the meetings start to get accepted, and we all get serious about preparing for them. And then all of a sudden, we're chasing the ball down the hill, trying to catch up. And that's what it feels like right now. And it's a wonderful feeling. So let me just extend a big thank you to everyone on this call for helping put this many-pieced, really behemoth of a project together. It's no small thing, and cross-partisan work is not easy. Our workplace isn't for reactionaries. It's not a place for short-term smear campaigns. We're doing the tough, complex, necessary work of repairing our country through its bedrock document, the Constitution. That's why we're so encouraged that the space we've created together can house conversations like the keynote one on Monday, tomorrow, at the National Citizen Leadership Conference with Democratic Representative Ted Deutsch from Florida, joining Republican Representative John Katko in upstate New York, in conversation on the necessity of this amendment. There will be breakout sessions with folks on the right, left, and center, talking through topics like how democracy reform work today, will transform America tomorrow. Breakouts also like big money disinformation politics and the erosion of civic trust and democracy makes us unsafe at home and abroad. On Thursday night, we'll have a breakout session dedicated specifically to sharing stories and successes from our week of Lobby Day meetings. We'll be joined by Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts, Dean Phillips of Minnesota, hopefully Representative Katko of New York, for some words before we open the floor up to hear from Lobby Day participants about all of our experiences. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that Lobby Days really are the most impactful thing that we can do to move this amendment forward. And I hope everyone on this call participates and gets others to participate along with them. But now I would like to introduce a champion in this work, Marie Henselter Kimmel, a leader in the New Jersey American Promise chapter, to tell us about her mindset before a meeting with an elected official. Hey, Marie, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Aether. And I just wanted to add one little piece of information to what you just said about the Lobby Day, the conference on Monday and night. They're all recorded. Every session is recorded. So when you get to the panel discussions, don't feel like you have to make a decision and split your time in two panel discussions. You're going to have access to all of them afterwards. So mindset before a meeting. I have to say it's very natural to feel nervous, and I certainly have felt nerves, even despite the fact that we've been at this for 4 years already. And I think the two reasons you feel nervous is because the outcome of your meeting is important in achieving the goal of getting money out of politics, which we all work so hard for. And we've worked to get the meetings with usually repeated contacts and then follow up with the staffer and then preparing with practices and so on. But also, for many people, it may be something that you haven't done before. So what I try to do ahead of time is just to say to myself, well, nuts and bolts, why am I having this meeting? So I'm having this meeting because I want to meet the staffer or meet the congressperson, get them to know me. I want to know them. I want them to know why we're there as members of American Promise, the work we're doing, and that we really want to start a relationship with this staffer and or this congressman, hopefully the staffer, then the congressperson, because we want to be able to use our voices as citizens to get what we want in self-government, right? That's what we're all in this for. We want the money from the corporations and the wealthy out of the way. So when we speak to our electeds, they can listen to what we say and represent that in the work that they do. So I just try to remind myself of that very simply, like, I'm just here to have a conversation. I'm here to try to start a relationship. I also feel very well prepared because this agenda that we have prepared, these lobby day trainings in the past, it's a really good model for holding a meeting. We've had numerous times, we've had compliments from staffers who have been with their Congress people for quite a long while saying, this is one of the best prepared groups I've ever met with. It's refreshing for them to have a group come in and give them thanks for something that the congressperson's doing and not just sit there and piss and moan, so to speak. So between that and the fact that we have information and a model for what to say, I felt very well prepared going into the meetings in the past, and I do again, because we're going to do the work. We've done the work of practicing. We know what we're going to say. We write it out ahead of time, then we practice it, and then we go in and do it. So it gets less and less nerve-wracking the more preparation you do in advance. And the last thing I have to say is I feel nervous excitement because I'm excited to see what new results our American Promise chapter can have as a result of our preparation and our prior meetings with our members of Congress and their staffs. So I'm very excited to go ahead with the meetings that we're going to have this week. Looking forward to it.
Super, thank you, Maria. I love the process of preparing for your meeting. You're nervous. Everyone has their role assigned, and then you execute the meeting, and invariably new things come up, and you adjust and you're prepared, and then you come out of the meeting and everyone's just like on fire and glowing and fired up, and then the next one is half as scary, and it continues to get easier and more exciting with more confidence. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to put in the chat here. This is a link to the training document that everyone on this call, I imagine, is familiar with by now, and I'm going to walk through one particular piece of it that I really want to emphasize here. And one of the differences this year with online meetings is we can't have a physical leave behind packet as we would if we were in person. We'd bring some materials with us that we wanted them to look at during the meeting, that we wanted to leave with them during the meeting. Really, in the online format, what we have is emails with the person that we're meeting with, or the person that we've been corresponding with in the congressional office. And we've added this section to the training material. Once I schedule my meeting, should I send specific information to the office ahead of time? And the answer is yes. If you haven't already, we have these two template emails, one to a Republican office that you're meeting with, and I won't walk through both of these, but you can tweak this however you'd like, but what it has is the couple of background documents that we think would be helpful for Republican offices to look at, and we have an equivalent Democratic email and a link you'll see in our ask to House Republicans, Senate Republicans, for example, is to review draft language that we're working to introduce with an even number of Democrats and Republicans. And it would be great if the person that we're meeting with has this language ahead of time, so they're not looking at it for 20 seconds when we bring it up at the end of the meeting, but they've had a chance to look at it potentially beforehand. So it's pretty easy if you copy and paste this into the text of your own email. And that's really what I would recommend for folks. If you haven't done this already, tomorrow's a great day to do it if your meetings are Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of this week. I'm not going to go through this whole training document. We'll go through the different parts of this meeting agenda with the introductions and thank you and personal story and asking a question and clarifying the issue, making the ask, following up, celebrating. But I will emphasize the real importance of sharing what you learn in these meetings. And we have a reporting form where we ask you to relay how these meetings went, what were particular concerns, what were particular points of potential breakthrough, did they request follow-up information? And we have a notes document that it really will be a great, important thing to assign someone in your team before your meeting starts to take notes. The real simple thing to do, I think, this notes document mirrors the reporting form, which we'll ask folks to fill out, after each meeting that you have. This document will be in view only for folks, but if you just go to File and click Make a Copy, you'll be able to make a copy and have it be editable. And that's what I would recommend for folks for taking notes here in these congressional meetings, which it is really just a critical piece of how we build up this institutional knowledge and are able to say, okay, well, over time, this is how the relationship with Senator Cory Booker, for example, in New Jersey is progressing. And, maybe there's a new crop of leaders in New Jersey one day, and we say, oh, we don't want them to be starting from ground zero. We want them to know what Marie and Joan and Monica and Heather and everyone there has been working on. So I'll just stress that point as a really important one. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and pass it over to another champion in this work, Vicki Barnes, Minnesota citizen leader, to tell us how she and her Lobby Day group plan to follow up from these meetings and how they plan to celebrate as well. And a sneak peek, it doesn't have to be with another Zoom call.
Thank you, Azer. Remember that Sam Daly Harris has taught us that building a relationship with our legislators is the way to success. During your meeting, you'll be asking something of them or asking a staffer to communicate your ask. If you don't follow up on that, your meeting will not have accomplished what you needed, what you intended. And this is where your excellent note taker shines. You wanted to develop that relationship and keep moving it along by referring to the conversation from that meeting. Good notes are crucial. Within the next day or two after your meeting, email the staffer and member of Congress if they attended and ask them for taking the time to meet with you. Thank them for taking the time to meet with you. Even if the member of Congress participated in the meeting, the staffer is who you'll be communicating with after this point. The point person can do this, or could be farmed out to an attendee from each meeting. Go over the notes with your agenda and recap the meeting for them so you can see what your takeaway was. You're letting them know that you listened and you're expecting a response. Copy everyone that attended the meeting, both from your group and their staff, so they're also reminded of what transpired and what the ask was. That's what we usually do. Then I mark a date in the calendar again to follow up with the staffer if I haven't heard from them. I've always had a response, so it should happen within a few weeks once the ask has had time to make it up the chain and the research is done. If you've not heard back 2 weeks or so later, I would go ahead and email again and ask if they need some further information to help them get enough information to respond to you. So one thing is important and may seem silly, but I recommend against copying and pasting your follow-up emails and just tweaking a few things. It's too easy to get the recipients and the discussions mixed up. So I would avoid that. So of the 7 meetings we have scheduled, all but one was organized by us via Zoom. After we're done with the staffer, we'll stay on and discuss how it went. We'll also take the time to do a victory dance. I'm still thinking of what song we'll use. And we will take a photo. That's important too, even though it's going to be from the screen. The effort of putting together a meeting, including the many emails and phone calls with offices through many staffers to get to the right person, then corralling the interested members to commit and then prepare, is a big accomplishment. Putting yourself out there in such an official manner can be intimidating, but once you've done that, you'll be much more comfortable for the next time. And even if your meeting is with an elected official or staffer that you're pretty sure there's no chance you will convince them to support your efforts, you have still won. You've educated them, demonstrated support in their district, and let them know that they have not heard the last of this. So if this was another time, I would have a big get together and celebrate. But I have to say that we're pretty zoomed out. So this year, we'll just take our victory lap.
Super. Thank you, Vicki. It's important to have your follow-up plan. I love what you said about personalizing the follow-up email to each person that you met with, and really not being hesitant to follow up again if you haven't heard back from an office. Oftentimes it does take more than one touch point. But and then lastly, to take that victory lap, however feels most celebratory to you. Celebrate, because it's no small thing, exercising your civic muscles and having these meetings. We're now going to transition into the real bulk of tonight's call, which is actually role playing a meeting with a Democratic member of Congress and a Republican member of Congress. In the chat there, you should have a link to that training document, which will be helpful to have open through the rest of this meeting. And we're not going to read it word for word right now, but we are actually going to demonstrate the first couple sections of it right now. And let me tell you how this next section will go. Marie, Vicki, and I will be an American Promise volunteer team on a lobby day visit. And Marnie here will be our member of Congress. And we're going to demonstrate the first portion of a congressional meeting. And that's where we do the welcome, do the introductions, we thank the Congresswoman for something that she's done, and we're going to share what moves us to work on this issue, a personal story. Then we're going to go into breakout rooms with 4 people in each room. And in those breakout rooms, you'll quickly decide who will be the member of Congress, and you'll proceed with the first part of this meeting, the welcome, the introductions, thanking the congressperson for something they've done, and sharing a personal story, what it is that moves you to work on this issue. And then we'll come back together in about 6 minutes or so, and we'll take a couple of questions after we'll continue going through the meeting agenda, and we'll demonstrate the open-ended question and the clarifying of the issue and the specific ask that we're making for first a Democratic House member of Congress, followed by a discussion and practice, just like we're doing here. And then we'll do the same thing for a Republican member of Congress, followed by a discussion and plenty of times for Q&A throughout. So now Marie, Vicki, and I are going to demonstrate this first section of a meeting. And here we are with Congresswoman Marnie Walsh. So I'm going to turn it to Marie here, who's our volunteer leader, kicking us off with some introductions.
Good evening, Congresswoman Marnie. Thanks so much for meeting with us. We're here to speak to you about our work as volunteers of American Promise, a cross-partisan citizen advocacy effort to win ratification of a constitutional amendment to place reasonable limits on the power of money in our political system. American Promise is holding its National Citizen Leadership Conference virtually this week with 1,000 attendees, our biggest ever. We're holding virtual lobby day meetings with our elected representatives from around the nation to gain support for the amendment resolution. I'm Marie Henselter Kimmel. I'm a retired OBGYN from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and a leader of Tri-County Chapter of American Promise since the chapter began in 2017. I'd like to have my colleagues introduce themselves. Azer?
Great, thank you, Marie, and thank you, Congresswoman Walsh. My name is Azer Cole. I am a small business owner in Trenton, New Jersey.
Hi, Congresswoman Walsh. My name is Vicki Barnes, and I'm from Bayonne, New Jersey, and I am a retired teacher.
Hi, everyone.
Congresswoman, how much time do you have to meet with us this evening?
I have about 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. And we want to respect your busy schedule. Is it okay if we take a screenshot of the group in our meeting with you now?
Yes, that's fine.
Great. So, here we go. Azer is going to present to us next.
Super, and we'll be quick here, Congresswoman. And I just want to thank you. I subscribed to your mailing list, and in your most recent email, I learned that you're a lead sponsor on a bill which would remove lead pipes from public and subsidized housing. And this just struck me as such an important thing to take seriously, something that might be easy to overlook if you weren't actively looking to solve a problem. And so I thank you for your leadership on this particular issue. Thanks, Congresswoman.
Thank you.
And Vicki is going to share something with us as well.
Great.
Thank you so much for your time, Congresswoman. And when someone is a soldier, their whole family serves. We endure hardships during absences, relocations, starting over in different schools and communities. It's a tough life, but we serve proudly. While I did not earn a paycheck, I volunteered to keep our military community strong. I set up an entire volunteer program for a K-12 school on an Army base in Italy. I was the elected mayor of a military community on base. We supported family members in many ways. When my husband retired, we had some trouble adjusting, but we figured it out. But since that time, we've been watching our country go from a strong democratic republic to an oligarchy. The wealthy have used their power to become more wealthy and get more power. Years of tax policies have enabled the wealthy to benefit at the expense of the rest of us. We've seen what other countries see when they look at us from our time in the service and our lives overseas. We've seen they're envious, but now not so much. The problem is that these wealthy people don't just influence elections with their money, they're influencing our policies as well. I worry that our country, where my family willingly served and sacrificed, is in danger. What are your concerns about that?
Super. So we're going to end this section of the role play, but we've done the welcome and the introductions. We've thanked the congressperson for something, and we've shared a powerful personal story, really showing, this isn't a problem that is seen in, campaign finance spreadsheets. This is a problem that's felt by real people across the country who are sharing why this issue matters to them. So now we're going to go into breakout rooms, and we'll split into breakout rooms with 4 people in each room. And in your rooms, you'll quickly decide who will be the member of Congress, and you'll proceed with the first part of the meeting, the introductions. You'll see how Marie confirmed the amount of time the Congresswoman had, thank the Congressperson for something they've done, and someone will share a personal story of what it is that moves them to work on this issue. So we'll go into breakout rooms for about 6 or 7 minutes, and I'm going to get started here before we come back and have plenty of time for questions. I'm going to bring back my leaders of this training, Marie and Vicki and Marnie, into the spotlight. But I hope that was useful for folks in these breakout rooms practicing the first part of these meetings. And would love to hear some questions from folks on this call, or general comments on that process. Questions might be more helpful if folks have them, and feel free to unmute yourself and just share where you're calling in from and to ask any questions that you have here.
Yeah, Azor, we had a discussion, and the question came up as to the relationship between HR1 and HJR1, and what politicians, some politicians are resistant, chiefly, I guess, on the Republican side are resistant. And I think we were looking for some direction from you in terms of, how to handle potential pushback on that
Yeah, it's a great question, and we'll address it quickly. So HR1, as folks on this call probably are familiar with, it's been in the news a lot. It's an 800 plus page enormous sort of democracy reform bill, which has passed through the House of Representatives and is currently waiting to be voted on in the Senate. It touches on voting rights, access to the ballot box, um, you know, increasing transparency to reduce dark money. And it's really not specifically what we're talking about in these congressional meetings. It's not a specific piece of legislation proposing an actual language for a constitutional amendment to allow for reasonable spending limits on money spent in elections. It's different than, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing, and it's good to talk about this. House Joint Resolution 1 in the House is the bill that we're talking about with Democrats, for example. So HR1 is 800 plus page enormous reform bill. HJR1 is a specific constitutional amendment proposal that we're talking about with House Democrats. So my advice, if a member of Congress says, I've already talked with someone about HR1, or I don't support HR1, so I don't support this, to quickly say, it's okay. We're actually not talking about HR1. We're talking about specifically a constitutional limit to allow for reasonable limit spending on money in elections. So just to be clear of that difference, I don't anticipate it will come up in these meetings, but if it does, it's good to be prepared. I see Ken has his hand up. So Ken, you want to unmute yourself and let folks know where you're calling in from?
Yeah, Ken Chester calling in from Wyoming, and we have meetings set up right now with Senators Barrasso and Lamas. We do not have one set up yet with Representative Cheney, although we have some contacts that we can work. But my question is, when we, at the beginning of the meeting, we're supposed to say something nice or something, praise the representative for something they've done. And I'm specifically thinking about Liz Cheney. The thing that she's most known for right now is her principled stand against Donald Trump, which I love, but is that too partisan? I mean, and she did it, so we can praise her because she did it, but is that too partisan of a thing to use as the thing we praise her for?
I think the thing is, you want your thanks to be a genuine thanks for something, and you're building a relationship with this particular member of Congress. So, if that's the thing that you feel most moved to thank her for, I'd say, go ahead and thank her for it.
Doesn't that make us very partisan, though?
Yeah,
That's my worry.
If you're even worried a little bit about that, there's no harm in thanking her for taking the time to have a meeting with you, or a great thing to do before one of these meetings in general is to look at your member of Congress's website, look at the recent press releases that they've put out, and they'll be trumpeting their recent accomplishments, and you can pull out something that sounds commendable to you. So I guess I'd walk back my initial advice, Ken, and say, maybe find something specifically.
So there actually were two good suggestions just made in the chat. Maybe you praise her for standing up for her principles. Thank her for being an independent thinker. Thank her for her consistency and her commitment to our democracy or our republic.
And this is another principled thing that we need to have people stand up for.
There you go. Yeah, that's a great way to frame it, sort of how you brought it up, Ken. Yeah. Anyone else with a quick question here, and specific to this meeting that we're practicing before we break out into the second part of the role play here tonight.
Azar, I was going to ask Ken, are you a veteran?
No, I'm not.
Oh, because if you had a veteran talking to him, talking to her, it's, you stood up for our country like I stood up in Iraq or wherever.
Right.
Super. I love that background, Jay, of Dean Phillips signing the candidate pledge. That's fantastic. Super. Well, we'll have two more sections for questions throughout the rest of this training, but now we're going to demonstrate the next section of our meeting. And if you have your training document up, you'll see that there's a section where we ask an open-ended question or two to our member of Congress. You don't have to be limited to one. Where we clarify our issue based on their response, and then where we transition into the ask for our meeting. And we're going to do this for both a Republican and a Democrat. And we're going to start with a Democratic member of Congress, specifically in the House of Representatives. So again, Marnie will be our member of Congress, and Vicky is going to kick us off here with an open-ended question for our member of Congress.
Representative Walsh, we just lived through a $14 billion election season. What do you think the role of money in politics should be?
So I know there are various efforts to address money in politics. I am proud to be a part of many of those. I don't want money in politics to distract real issues that impact real people. I am glad to be talking to you to uncover ways on how to resolve it.
Marie?
Okay, I'll just go ahead from there, sorry. So many everyday citizens feel that they don't have any effect on what our government does when solutions that are widely supported by citizens are not undertaken because deep-pocketed special interests or billionaires are lobbying and making campaign donations to politicians who oppose those solutions. We're happy to have the opportunity to talk to you about the solution to money in politics that we support. We support an amendment to the Constitution for three reasons. It's permanent, it has precedent, and it has wide popular support. In the past, legislation like the McCain-Feingold Act and many state laws about campaign finance were in place to limit the money, but Supreme Court decisions like Buckley versus Vallejo and Citizens United overturned those laws and unleashed this flood of money. The longstanding campaign finance laws of 24 states were overturned by the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court. In order to get a permanent solution, we need to amend the Constitution. Second, there's ample precedent for overturning faulty Supreme Court decisions. In fact, the very first amendment made, the 11th Amendment, was overturning a Supreme Court decision, and that was done in 1793. So there's long precedent. 8 of the 17 amendments passed since the Bill of Rights have been overturning the Supreme Court. And third, there's wide popular support. Multiple surveys have shown that 75% of all Americans across the political spectrum support limiting the uncontrolled money in politics by a constitutional amendment. 66% of Republicans, 85% of Democrats, and get the number for independents right now, 72% of independents support an amendment. You've previously been a co-sponsor of HJ Res 2 in the last Congress, and we'd like to ask that you co-sponsor HJ Res 1, which has already been introduced in this Congress.
Super. Thank you for this, and I will review it. I believe it's the same legislation that I've co-sponsored in the past congressional sessions, so I'll take a look at it closely, like I do with everything, and I'll reach out if I have any questions.
Super. Thank you, everyone. We're going to exit this role play, and I'll say specifically for House Democrats, our primary ask is for them to co-sponsor House Joint Resolution 1 if they have not already. It's a good idea to find out before your meeting starts if they have co-sponsored HJ Resolution 1 this session already. And in that training document, you'll see a direct link to House House Joint Resolution 1 and to the co-sponsors. And there you'll be able to quickly, I like doing Command F and just typing in their last name. I'll be able to find if they have, and I can see what day they co-sponsored if they're there. And if they're not there, I'll know that they haven't yet co-sponsored it. And then it makes sense as a primary ask. So now we're going to go back into our breakout rooms and practice this sequence: the open-ended question, hearing the response from the congressperson, clarifying the issue as Marie did based on their response, and transitioning then to the ask for our Democratic US House member. So 7 minutes or so to go in your breakout rooms. And then, similar to what we just did, we'll circle back and have time for questions and comments. All right, folks are starting to come back here from the breakout rooms. I'm gonna find my leaders for this training, but feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask any question that you have here that would be useful to talk through as a group. And we'll do a couple more minutes of Q&A here and let folks know where you're calling it from as well.
Azor, I have a question.
Yes.
It could well be that some of us who live in Republican districts are going to get very hard pushback. And it would really be good if we could have a collection of sort of questions that we could respond to a very hard pushback with. Or maybe you could suggest how to proceed.
Yeah, so I'd quickly say, you might get some pushback if, a member of Congress says, oh, I don't support this for X, Y, and Z reason. And rather than getting into a debate with that member of Congress or their staff, my strong recommendation would be to ask a follow-up question and say, oh, well, could you just share more about why specifically you don't support what we're talking about? And all of a sudden we're listening, all of a sudden we're getting more information as to where they're coming from. And that's really how you'll keep this meeting going along well. Marie or Vicky, can you think of an instance where you've come up against some pushback in a meeting like this, and sort of any tips of how to best handle it?
I haven't thought. Probably the best thing is to not get in an argument. So I would, maybe fall back on our polling figures or whatever and say, I understand that that's how you feel about it, but Americans, feel this way about it. Do you see why they might, or, just kind of avoid an argument, but share information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, my very first meeting was a Republican member, and the reason that we didn't get any pushback was because our ask was really modest. We were asking for his point of view, and because we weren't so eager to tell him what was wrong, he told us what was wrong. So the open-ended question is the way that you can avoid the pushback, because you're not pushing, you're inviting.
Yeah, and remember that if you go back to the training document that Azor shared very early in this session tonight, there's actually, if you look through it, there's a lot of information. There are connections to conservative talking points by Jim Rubens, who's a former New Hampshire state senator and is a conservative and is on our advisory council for American Promise. And the draft language is there, and there's some connections to some other conservative talking points and some conservative versions of the open-ended question. So I would say go with that, and don't fight with them. Just say, okay, can you tell me more? Can you tell me more? And if you feel like you're not getting any further, then just say, okay, thank you so much for sharing your viewpoints with us. That's what we're here for.
I have one quick question. What is the percentage of Americans that are in favor of the 28th Amendment? Not political groups, but total Americans.
Yeah, so you'll see there's polling that we link to in our training document. It's from a 2019 study from the University of Maryland. And it's 85% of Democrats, 66% of Republicans, and I believe it's 75% of independents support this amendment specifically.
Okay, so we don't have an American statistic. We only have the political.
I'd have to double check, but Vicky, it sounds like maybe you have this.
75%.
Okay,
Okay.
that's pretty good.
And that's the amendment. More than that, want to feel that money in politics is a problem. What's that? Do you remember?
85% or 88%
Yeah.
overall, something of that nature. Just feel that it's a problem, but 75% support the constitutional amendment to fix it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I see Marnie in the chat here put a good question. We've been talking about House Democrats, but a quick note on Senate Democrats on our primary ask. The Senate equivalent version of House Joint Resolution 1, which we're asking House members about, is not yet introduced. It's going to be introduced later this month by Senator Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire. And so just to clarify for our Senate ask, it's absolutely appropriate to ask our Democratic senators to connect specifically with Senator Jean Shaheen's office to add their name as an early co-sponsor of the reintroduction of this House Joint Resolution 1 companion bill in the Senate. So I just wanted to touch on that because I know our role play here is dealing with House Democrats. Got time for maybe one more question before we role play the third and final section of our training tonight. Does anyone have a question here on the call?
I have a real quick question. The leave behind document, should we actually email that in advance, or should we or the talking points document, should we give that in advance, or just keep that for ourselves and use that to prepare for our speeches?
Yeah, my recommendation would be to, as you'll see in the training document and what we talked through sort of at the top of this call, there's a sample email to send to a Democratic office or a Republican office ahead of time, which does have hyperlinks for them to follow to useful background information sources. And so I would review that document. Feel free to tweak the email, make it your own if you feel strongly about it. But it is good to get information that you want them to see to them ahead of time.
So I want to just really quickly bring up, we have actually have two people on the call who are well experienced in lobbying. We have Elizabeth Doty, who's the head of a Business American Promise Network, and we have Alan LaPolice, who is ran as a Republican candidate in Kansas, I believe, and they're making comments. You might want to look back at what they're saying about Republican lawmakers, what they would fall back to is the First Amendment, and maybe what you would answer with that, and talk about how the Republicans now are very concerned about big tech and suppression of free speech by big tech and big spenders. Maybe use that for a question about their campaign donations by big tech and big spenders affecting their ability to get their message out.
Definitely. Yeah, great point, Marie. Thank you for flagging that there is a lot of useful discussion going on in the chat right now, which is, I think, a good addition to some of the answers here, and certainly strengthening the answers to these questions that we can give. So now we're going to go through the third section, the third role play that we're going to demonstrate here today. And it's the same section of the agenda that we just did. Open-ended question, hearing the member of Congress's response, contextualizing their answer within the transition to our ask. But now we're going to be role-playing with a Republican House representative. Marnie is going to remain our member of Congress. She has switched parties. And Marie, thank you for kicking us off here with an open-ended question for the Congresswoman.
So Congresswoman, we've just lived through a $14 billion election season, including $3 billion of outside spending and millions of dollars spent across state lines to support and oppose candidates by both sides. This nationalizes local elections. What do you think the effect of money in politics has been on states being able to run their own elections without outside interference?
So Marie, $14 billion definitely sounds like a lot of money. And I do think that there should be tighter disclosure to allow us to see where the money is coming from. But I do worry that we go down a dangerous path if we start setting limits on money spent in elections. I am concerned about interfering in the First Amendment's rights to speak.
Congresswoman Walsh, I understand that you're concerned about what the consequences of limiting spending may be, especially around the First Amendment. But if you look at our sample draft language, which we have included in the packet, you'll see that it's written in a way that makes it clear that passing legislation that favors any one person or group over another would be unconstitutional. Passing this amendment would give us those guidelines, and Americans support setting limits on campaign spending by an overwhelming margin. Yes, we speak a dollar when we're deciding which brand of peanut butter to purchase, but we're not consumers of our democratic process. We're citizens in a self-governing nation. Our ability to govern has been corrupted by the megaphones of big moneyed interests drowning out our individual voices. I ask that you take a look at our sample draft language, and please let us know if you have any questions at all. We'll be happy to help you.
Thank you, Vicki. I will most definitely look at the draft language.
Super, thank you. And there, one of the things that you should feel free to do in a meeting with an elected official is the instance where you ask an open-ended question. There's been $14 billion spent. What do you think? And the congressperson gives an answer that's maybe 30 seconds long or a minute long, and we really want to know more about what they think. And so you could say, well, could you say more about that? Or you could ask an additional question. But we really want to treat these meetings sort of as fact-finding missions, particularly with these Republican offices. We just want to hear in their words what they're thinking about when it comes to this issue. And I really would not gloss over this section. And in your role plays here that we'll break out into in just a minute, maybe just by default plan to, ask 2 or even 3 questions at the front end of this section in the role play, because it really is a good chance to get a lot of information on where your elected official or their staff is coming from. And it's going to really help you with your follow-up as well. And you'll be able to key into specific things they said and build a relationship that way. Feel free, as we've been doing, to unmute yourself. Please do share where you're calling in from so we can get some sort of geographic idea of who all is representing the country tonight. But open floor for questions and comments. I hope these practice sessions really are helpful over and over. This will improve your comfort being in these meetings, but open floor for folks if you want to shout out a question that you have here.
Azer, we have
I think that Laura may have gotten frozen, but she was in my group, so I'll go ahead and pose the question. I came up with a question at the end of, if it's a staffer, and we're talking to a Republican staffer here, should the question be posed, what do you think, you the staffer think? Or should the question be posed, do you have any insight as to what the congressperson's or senator's viewpoint is on the language or the open-ended question?
Yeah, it's a great question. I might phone a friend. I see Illinois Police in the chat here has said I'd go for both. Alan, could we bring you into the conversation to talk a little bit more about that? And
Love to.
Alan Police is American Promise's new states manager, who brings a dearth of political experience with them as a candidate, as a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent for Congress in Kansas, and is a longtime champion of this specific amendment. So Alan, thank you for being here and for touching on this good, sort of tricky question.
It's my pleasure. To just go with that, I would say going into this meeting, know that whoever you're talking to, whether it's a staffer, upper level or lower level, or whether you get the congressperson themselves or the senator, they're still people. You know, they're still human beings, and they still have a soul. They still hopefully go back at the end of the day to their wife or their husband, their kids. They still have lives, and they still, if they're in Congress, ostensibly they love America, and they want to see what's best for America. So personalize this meeting as much as you can, and say, you know, what is it that you think the congressperson's real hurdle is to, you know, considering HJR1, and then once you get that, I would say, how do you feel about this? Because if you're taking a meeting with a staffer at whatever level, they have access to that member of Congress, and they have personal opinions too. I would direct the question to them and say, how do you feel about it? And then, you know, what argument would you use to bring your feelings, your own personal feelings, to my member of Congress's, you know, attention?
Yeah, it's a great. What I'm hearing is, you know, let's not discount the staffer. Let's not say, well, their feelings are a homogenous block with the member of Congress. You know, it really is. You've got to have a good relationship with the staffer as well as the member of Congress, and it cannot overlook those relationships. Alan, I'm going to leave you here in the spotlight, so just in case there's another question that your expertise would be handy on, but feel free to continue shouting out questions here in the last 10 minutes or so. This is really our chance to discuss as a group.
I have a question.
Go for it.
I don't know much about spending across the state line. Is that legal? Is it illegal? Is a lot of it happening? Why are we bringing it up?
Yeah, so I'll touch on this briefly. It's not illegal, you know, but you do hear about outside spending, and you hear about, you know, local elections being sort of nationalized by special interest groups who might not care so much about the local politics, but, you know, really want, you know, elected officials in Pennsylvania, for example, to keep hydrofracking legal. Or, you know, you might have a big national company like Nestle put a lot of money into Maine, a small rural state with competitive elections, because they want to continue having permits granted for their Poland Springs water bottling plant. And what you get is, you know, sort of the drowning out of local voices. You know, airwaves are bought up, pricing out local advertisers and businesses, and, you know, political groups that are just sort of at the mercy of these big, deep-pocketed outside interests. So it is one of the areas.
I want to share something, Azer. I'll never forget this. This was early in 2018, not too long after I had joined American Promise, and we had a national monthly call with a new congresswoman in Nevada. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Nevada legislature had just been tilted over to Democrats because there were 3 new Congress people elected. And there was a recall that all of a sudden there was campaigning for a recall of her. And she had no idea who was doing it. It turned out it was a Washington, D.C. group. They were not in state, but they were putting money into a recall of her from the state legislature in Nevada. That's money across state lines that has no business in deciding who's in Congress. This is a state congressperson, a state assembly member or a senator, what have you. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's talking about nationalizing a local election. That's the kind of thing that happens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll say quickly, you know, that it used to be constitutional for states to say well, we're the state of Montana. We're going to have specific laws for our elections that, you know, in Montana, for example, they had, you know, a law that said there can be no corporate contributions for candidates running for Montana elected office, and that's deemed unconstitutional because of Supreme Court decisions. And this amendment would again allow states to have the choice to even make laws like that, cutting back against these outside big spenders. It's a great question. Definitely a serious avenue to engage in conversation with some folks who might be resistant. I hear someone else jumping in here, maybe with a question or a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on for Audrey is hopefully we've researched whoever we're talking to, the candidate, and whether or not they've benefited from the out-state money or not. It might not be something you want to be emphasizing to like Congresswoman Omar, who has had a lot of out-state money come in both for and against her. In fact, her opponent, I think, even had more than she did. Was well financed from out of state.
So are you saying don't talk about it?
No, I'm saying be careful. If you're talking to somebody who got 75% of their money from outside the state, you're gonna have to be careful how you say that.
Well,
I think
go ahead.
I'm sorry. The bottom line is it's good to research who you're meeting with, and great to research, you know, what type of race were they in their most recent election. Was it wildly expensive? And you can go down, you know, research holes of finding, you know, amounts of in-state versus out-of-state money spent in their races. But anyone else with the question or comment here in the last couple minutes of this call?
Function question. I know that the video will be recorded, but do we have to save the chat, or will you save it and mail it to us? And what about the ones like I came in late, so not today, I've missed some of the others. Is there a way to get the files of the chats from the other recordings?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We do have the recordings of all of the previous Zoom calls. They're at the very top of the training document. And
Yep.
I do think it's possible to download the chats on our end from this Zoom call. And it does sound like folks do think that would be helpful. So for this call specifically, we can include the transcript of the chat in a recap email that we should get out tomorrow from this call. I'm glad that folks are finding the chat to be a useful source.
Just in case you want to save it right now, go to the bottom of the chat. There's a little link that says file, and then there's an ellipsis next to it. If you press on the ellipsis, the three dots next to each other, it says save chat. And you can do that, and you'll have it on your computer right now. You won't have to say, oh gosh, I'm not going to have time to look at it because the email came out at whatever, and I'm going to be attending conferences, you know, Monday night.
Thank you for that, Maria. That's a much better solution. You can save it on your computer right now.
And above it, there's a link that will pop open File Manager to show you what directory it stuck it in, so you don't have to look at it. So you can then move it to whatever file you like it in best.
Perfect.
You know where that goes on the Mac?
You choose.
Sorry, I got a PC, but mine is underneath a Zoom folder.
In your Mac, it usually, when you save your chat, it will save, and then a little thing will pop up and it says go to Finder, and then you click Finder and it will be in where your documents are. I just tried it on my Mac.
Super. Thanks, you guys. And
the ellipse in the chat to save it.
Yeah, in the bottom right, you should be able to download it on your computer. And thanks everyone for taking their Sunday night to go through another one of these practice sessions. I do hope these trainings are useful. With more practice, they get easier and easier to visualize. And next week really is the big week, and we can't wait to hear how they go for folks. It's certainly not too late to gather in your specific lobby day groups with the specific people who will be in your meeting with your specific member of Congress, and go over your specific research to this person. And I would recommend folks do that if you haven't already. And I know many folks on this call have been doing it already. And it's not it's just the necessary tough, really vital work that goes into making these meetings a success. But we're at about the end of our call here, and folks, this is really sort of the calm before the storm. It's going to be a busy week of meetings, 50 plus meetings scheduled. I haven't looked at my email over the weekend, but I would imagine that number is climbing. And I just want to thank everyone for being a part of this and helping put this together. Marie and Vicky, thank you particularly for helping Marnie and I lead these trainings. Do either of you have a final last closing word for folks as we get ready for this week?
It will all get done. Take a deep breath. It will all get done.
Yes. Yep. It'll be a great experience. And afterwards, everybody is going to be full of adrenaline and all excited about it. So do celebrate.
Yeah.
All right. Super. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining us, Alan. Thank you everyone on this call, and feel free to unmute yourself and just to say goodnight. It's nice to hear some new voices, not just your.
Good night. Good night,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Great job.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Thanks
much.